Everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balcabbage. We're back for another edition of the Thyroid Answers Podcast. And today's going to be a Q&A podcast. We have back Tara Quintana, who's a board-certified nurse practitioner. And she was on I was on your podcast, right?
You were on my podcast.
Yeah. And we had a really good conversation. And then I don't even think we got finished, right? There was still questions and stuff. And I said, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't you come on and we'll do a Q&A with questions that you might still have, your listeners might have, maybe clients might have, and we'll discuss some of those questions, because if you or your clients or your patients or your listeners have those questions, I'm sure lots of other people have the same questions. So Tara, thanks so much for coming back onto the podcast, or coming to the podcast. But can you give the listeners some insight into who you are and what you do before we get into the questions?
Absolutely. First, Eric, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. So I got into healthcare later in life. It's not something that I dreamt of doing as a child. I was actually using the other side of my brain with theater and art. And then I watched pretty much everyone in my family go through like horrific diseases, and both of my parents passed away in their 50s. And so at that time, I went into healthcare and I worked in oncology and hospice, and I loved it. And then I went back to school to become a nurse practitioner and focused in women's health. Then everything with my health took a turn for the worse, and I had hypothyroidism for years, and I ended up having my thyroid enlarged to the point where I couldn't eat solid food. And they told me I had lymphoma. And I thought I had lymphoma. I told my kids I had lymphoma for about 4 months. And then they were removing my thyroid, which is not a treatment for lymphoma typically, but it's because I couldn't eat and I was losing a lot of weight. And come to find out, when all of this was going on, I went back to school to the Institute of Functional Medicine because, frankly, I was trying to figure out how I'm supposed to survive. And it changed everything. It changed everything about my life. I found out I have Hashimoto's disease. I have multiple other autoimmune markers. And I was told from various specialists that basically I was hopeless, that I can't outrun my poor genetics, that it's in my future. It was in my parents. And there's nothing that I could do. And at this time, I could barely walk. I could barely get up, and I would fall down a lot. And frankly, it was terrifying. Well, when I really dug in to me and what was driving it changed everything about my life. That not only do I feel 90% better. I don't believe in perfection. I wish it was 100%, but like markedly better. But it changed everything about the way that I practice medicine, because I couldn't operate in an insurance-based system where you have 7 minutes and the only thing you have time to do is to write a script. And so I ended up leaving the practice I was at and starting my own practice. And it has been like, if you would have asked me this when I was like 16 years old, could I imagine I would be doing this? I would have told you that you're crazy. And now I can't imagine doing anything else. So that's kind of
and this is a common story, right? And we both came from a medical background. And I think what happens in like medical based training, right? What's the disease? How do I cut it out? How do I drug it? How do I manage it? That's like the base, right? And you could say, well, what's wrong with that model? Well, it works really good in an acute care model, right? It works really good if the philosophy is things happen to you, right? And there's just nothing you can do, then allopathic medicine is a great strategy, because the only thing you have cancer, you got it, right? And so now we have to manage it, or we have to cut it out. In that model, we often don't consider asking the question, like, why did the abnormal tissue develop? Is there something we could do or did do that influenced our physiology that this developed? Or we go, you just have high blood pressure, right? So we're going to manage your blood pressure, but we don't consider what is the person doing in their life that may be creating it. And maybe a lot of clinicians say, yeah, they eat terrible, they exercise terrible, there's nothing they're going to do to change it. And maybe I understand that a lifestyle plays a huge role, but we really don't spend more than in a 7-minute appointment. You're not doing those types of interventions, right? You're not saying, okay, let's break this down. So the model's just in that model. And I think because I was in that model too, and you go, all right, well, if the leg's broken, you fix it, right? If they've got pain, you give them a drug, right? If the muscles are weak, you strengthen them. But we really didn't spend a lot of time really getting to the why. And I wonder how big of you said it was a huge change in your philosophy. Is it because the paradigm really changed from, hey, the body is just not very smart, not very intelligent. It just constantly keeps breaking down. Or did you change? Did you get to a place in your mind where, like, man, the body has some amazing intelligence to it? My philosophy is the body often doesn't, the first thing the body does is not break down. The body's always in this constant state of adaptation. It's trying to protect itself. Did you get to a point where you had that kind of like aha moment, like, this isn't, my body's trying to address something, it's trying to protect me from something, it's not broken? Or do you still feel like the body just doesn't have the ability to fix itself or the intelligence, and I'm just using different medications or supplements to do the same thing?
I love that you brought this up because, frankly, if you'd have asked me this when I first started on a functional medicine roadway, I would have told you I'm just looking for the supplement to replace the pill, right? And I was asking, like, what do I take? What do I take? I wasn't, because I thought I was broken. I was told I was broken. I was told there was nothing that I could do. And I was terrified, right? And like, why even get out of bed at that point? Even though I could barely get out of bed. So yes, I had several aha moments. And when I realized we are not broken, we are designed to survive. And I say this every single day with my patients, that there's a reason why things are not working or adapting, as you say. And for me, it was the things I didn't want to do. Like, I didn't even want to address them. And at the time, through IFM, I had a health coach, and I flat out told her, we're not talking about sleep and stress, because I don't have time to sleep. And I live in a stressed state, and that's how I'm productive. These are the things that I said to her. And so I have a lot of empathy for everybody that I work with, because I was very resistant. And it wasn't until I really looked at what I was doing, like me, and not doing that, like these fundamental aspects of health, it isn't about chasing a number, like you said, and we talked about on my podcast, optimal ranges. I understand that philosophy. That is my nurse practitioner training. And frankly, I have to fight that in myself, because I'm like, what are the numbers? And, oh yeah, we could do better. It's 3.5, your TSH is 3.5. Well, let's get it between 1 and 2, right? That's the optimal range. But then stepping back and looking at why is this happening? If we just chase a number, are we healing the body? Because I do believe we can heal, but we have to dig deeper. And it's more than just what the value of a lab says. It matters what we're willing to do.
And I think it becomes I think that for me was the big thing. Like, okay, wait a minute, this isn't broken, it's adaptive. And for the listener, like, if you came to an allopathic physician, typically with high blood pressure, they would say you have high blood pressure and we need to lower your blood pressure. And that would be an appropriate treatment, right? Because high blood pressure is potentially problematic. If you came to a functional medicine practitioner who practices allopathically, they may say, well, I'm going to give you some supplements that are going to help lower your blood pressure versus doing the blood pressure medication. And that may be beneficial, right? It may still lower it. What a functional medicine practitioner who actually, in my opinion, practices functional medicine would say is, all right, look, you have elevated blood pressure. Your body needs to get blood flow to your extremities and your brain. And so it has had to increase the blood pressure to do that. Now we have to understand, why is that occurring? Is it increasing blood pressure because you have cardiovascular disease? And if that's the case, what do we need to do to change that? Is that blood pressure elevated for a number of other reasons? And then we should address the issue. Now, we still might want to manage the pressure so it's not problematic. But if all we do is manage the blood pressure, we exchange one problem for the other, right? If the body really needed to perfuse the feet and hands and brain, and it had to increase the pressure to get blood flow there because of constriction for some reason, and now all we do is lower blood pressure, sure, you may not die of a cardiovascular insult to your heart or a ruptured blood vessel in your body. But now you're not perfusing your feet, your hands, and your brain. And so instead of dying of cardiovascular disease, you're going to die with Alzheimer's or dementia and peripheral neuropathy, right? So are we fixing it, or are we exchanging the disorder to one that's maybe less noticeable or less manageable? Like, we're dealing with the today crisis, but kicking the can down the road. So this is important, especially when we're talking about thyroid physiology, my opinion, and I want you to you can throw your opinion in, but we do this a lot with thyroid physiology. We look at a hypothyroid condition and medically we say, hey, the gland's going to be destroyed. It's probably, I know we make fun of allopathic physicians sometimes because they're like, how silly these doctors are. They don't even know that it's an autoimmune condition because they didn't run antibodies. I guarantee you, almost every endocrinologist and medical physician who treats hypothyroidism knows it's an immune-driven disorder. It's only one of two primary things. It's either immune-driven or iodine deficiency, right? Those are the two big things that are going to drive it. Or you had your thyroid gland cut out, right? Or destroyed. Those are the big three. So I believe all allopathic physicians realize it's immune-driven condition in the most part. But their treatment strategy is to just assume that it's going to go on. There's nothing we're going to do. There's nothing your body's going to do. It just happens to people, just the way life is. You rolled a bad, set of dice, right? And that's the way it is. And so in this, then the game plan that is to give T4 to replace what the gland would have made, since that's the primary hormone. That's the allopathic approach. We're not doing things vindictively to make you worse or to make you unhappy. That's the strategy. But we have a problem in functional medicine to some degree because we go, oh, that's silly. That's not good. They're not looking at T3, or we have some other misunderstandings about what T3 and reverse T3 mean. And when they say, we're going to give you T4 and T3, and we're going to normalize the value, and then life will be good. But this goes right back to the blood pressure thing. There's a reason you developed the thyroiditis. There's a reason the T4 is not converting to T3. And if all we do is flood the system with different drugs and not address those root issues, right? What's driving the inflammatory process, what's driving the underconversion, and we just put more thyroid hormone into a system that may not want it, there's long-term consequences. Yes, we may reduce some of your symptomatology temporarily, but at what risk? Are we going to have more anxiousness, more anxiety, more dementia, more histamine responses, more GI dysregulation, more possibility or probability of developing cancers as a result of taking excessive amounts of thyroid medication? What is the risk? So that's my passion story that I'm so concerned about, especially somebody reached out to me and said, why are you so negative to the functional medicine community on this. I'm not negative to the functional medicine community. I am trying to, we're like living in a glass house and throwing stones, right? We are saying, hey, you guys have it all wrong. We're doing it right. But I still don't think we're doing it. A lot of people are doing it right from a functional medicine paradigm or thought process. Mm-hmm. Give me your thought process on that.
I 100% agree that if we are not looking for what is driving the disease process or the symptoms, then we're missing the mark. And so many people that come to see me have seen multiple other functional medicine practitioners, and they're not better. Some of them have been working with somebody for over 8 years, and they're not better. And they're so focused on the lab values. And when I try to slow them down and say, well, what are your symptoms? How do you feel? How do you sleep? What kinds of food do you eat? It's all of these basic components are not there. Frankly, I don't see them talked about a lot of times, at least not with the people that are coming to see me. So, and aside from, if we're just going to give medication, because I see a lot of people who have autoimmune diseases, I feel like, because like we just can sense it in each other, and they know like I'm one of them. And that, how are we addressing that, right? So you said if we just flood the body with an exogenous hormone, what could the downstream effects be? Well, if the immune system is dysregulated, right? Not because it's broken, but because there's some underlying reason for the dysregulation. And there's like a laundry list of things that it could be, and it's usually more than one, right? Then what is brewing in the body with the immune system? Like I am very passionate about this, because if you have one autoimmune condition, you're more likely to develop another one. And why is that, right? Well, if there's a dysregulation already and the immune system is on guard, we're designed to remember, right? If we make antibodies, I don't believe antibodies themselves are like what the issue is, right? They're not necessarily the dangerous component. It's what the immune system does. And what the immune system is doing is to protect us. So if we're making antibodies, and I do a lot of testing in my practice, and people are making antibodies to all kinds of things. I was making antibodies to like the dryer sheets, like the components in dryer sheets, and mold and this and that, like a laundry list of things. So we're all of these different things. The issue that I have to become hyper focused on, everything is because of mold or because I had chronic Lyme and this and that. Those things matter, but why? What was unique and different about me that I get bit by a tick? And I know not only do I get Lyme disease, but I get chronic Lyme, where somebody else could get bit by a tick or have, and they don't appear to have any issues. So I feel like we definitely need to like cast a wider net with this and look at what is the foundation of health, right? It isn't a lab value. That's not the foundation of health. It's the components of having cellular physiology optimal, right? And I look at that not like, okay, if I can get my TSH to 1.5, I'm good. Then it means I'm optimal. No, it's how is my sleep? Am I getting 8 hours of sleep? Is it restful sleep? How about my thoughts? Or do I have negative thoughts? Because one negative thought can cause our gut lining to become more permeable, right? All of these things matter. And I'm a very opinionated individual, because I do feel like we have to, if we're not looking at these components, and I didn't want to look at them with myself. I was very resistant, and I didn't get any better, even though my labs normalized. I never felt better. It wasn't until I really I'm going to say hard, because for me, It was very hard because I didn't want to do it. I did the hard work. Now I look at it, it's not so hard anymore. I have a very solid why for the reasons that I go to bed at a certain time, and I try to focus on my circadian rhythm. And if I don't sleep well, I'm not running 5 miles the next day or every day like I used to, saying, be tough. You're tough, Tara. You're tired, get out there and run. Like I'm focusing more on listening to like how I feel versus what something exogenously, something else is telling me how I feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's when Kelly and I wrote the book, The Thyroid Debacle, it's exactly what the last part of the book is all about, is like, hey, what are the foundational things that you really need to tackle first, right?
Yeah.
Or everybody needs to be working on, regardless of what health condition you have, or if you don't have any diagnosed conditions, right? We often want to jump to, what do I do to treat my constipation? What do I do to treat my high blood pressure? What do I need to do to treat my X? In medicine, in medical practice, allopathic medicine, they give you a drug. In functional medicine, people come and we still have to fight that need. Like, I've got constipation. What supplement can I use? Right. So we may try and managing things and make life a little easier with those things, but ultimately we have to fight that. And you kind of mentioned this before, like, hey, I'm fighting that philosophy in my mind and that training in my mind.
Yes.
And what we still need to do is say, okay, listen, what's driving our health issues is our diet, it's our lifestyle, it's our thoughts, it's our habits, it's our behaviors, it's all of these things. So to try and treat something, but still have those things not very you're not very fit in those categories, is probably not going to work out very well for the long run. So I think everybody has to work on those foundational concepts of diet and sleep and mindset and good nutrition. We don't need to be perfect. I think that creates a stress in itself, but we need to be consistently good, higher levels of fitness in each of those categories. And we call them the fitness factors. You probably have different names for them, but I think those are the things. And then when we do those things and we're doing them really well, but we still have some signs and symptoms or labs that are still out of range, then that's where we have to say, okay, let's dig in a little bit deeper and look for the oddball things. Let's look for the weird organisms that may be continually creating a problem, the chronic infection, right? The trauma issue, the toxicity that we've lost tolerance to, an immune system that's just become dysregulated and can't get itself reestablished because the body is still acting as if there's cell danger, even though the threats are gone. So I think those foundational things really become the things that all of us have to work on. But it is tough some days when people are like, but what can I take to get to sleep? Right. And I get it. I know what they want. They just want the supplement option instead of the drug. And we say, all right, we can try some things, but are you on your phone until right before you want to go to bed? Yeah. Okay. Well, how about we don't do that? How about we turn the Wi-Fi off? How about did you exercise? Do you typically exercise during the day? No. How about you go for a long walk after dinner, right? How about you start doing the things that are going to create better sleep quality before we just rush off to the next supplement or drug that force you into a light sleep. And then you still haven't addressed the root issues, which is your habits, your behaviors, and your lifestyle. And you think that, oh, that drug, that supplement only worked for a while. It didn't work anymore. That didn't work. That didn't work. Well, it didn't work because the things that are driving the sleep disorder are still present. You're trying to use an allopathic philosophy with supplements. It didn't work with drugs, which are typically stronger. It probably isn't going to work long term with supplementation either. What we have to do is ask those questions like, why am I struggling to get to sleep at night? What's going on in my mind? What am I doing with my habits and behaviors that may create it? So anyway, we had a great starting conversation. We blew through a half an hour already. So we have a lot of questions that you came with from your clients and your listeners. So let's get into those. Let's try and answer as many of those. And today we're going to say this is part one, because I'm looking at this going, we're going to probably need a part two. So let's go through it.
There's a lot of questions. Okay.
I saw that.
I've heard that gluten sensitivity can impact thyroid function. Can adopting a gluten-free diet help manage Hashimoto's disease symptoms?
Maybe. If gluten reactivity is part of your what I like to call the load, I don't think there's sometimes we say, what's the root cause of my issue? I don't think there's a root cause. I mean, for somebody, maybe if the lucky individual, maybe it is. I just have a Lyme infection, right? I only have this one spirochete that's causing the problem. But for the vast majority of people, it's a load, not a thing. And
Yes.
so if part of your load is gluten reactivity, then removing gluten might be helpful, right? Because if your immune system has already lost tolerance to the peptides in wheat, and you can continue to consume it, you're going to continue to create inflammation. You're going to continue to upregulate the immune system. There are people that say, well, gluten always causes cross-reactivity with thyroid tissue, therefore everybody needs to be off of it. I don't think that's necessarily true for everybody. Some people would say, well, everybody should be off wheat and gluten because wheat is sprayed with Roundup, and Roundup is an antibiotic and it destroys the gut flora. That may be true for sure, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's also probably has a lot of Roundup in it. But I think to just say that just because you have a thyroid issue, you have to be off wheat across the board, has to happen to everybody. I don't know that that's the case. So, but I do recommend for most people at the start an anti-inflammatory protocol many times. And I don't recommend a lot of grains for people early on in when you're working with somebody for the reasons of toxicity, especially things like Roundup that can continue to create problems in the gut. Now, a lot of people who have thyroid issues are going to have glucose regulation issues. So a whole bunch of processed grains is probably not in their best interest. So I'm not a huge, I think we should minimize the amount of processed food. And when you say that, guess what? You're going to remove a lot of wheat-based products because we're not eating wheat in its natural state. We're not chewing on a stalk of wheat. That gluten that's in food is most often in processed food. And that's part of what we're trying to eliminate when we're trying to get somebody healthier.
Yeah, I agree. I do not necessarily think everybody needs to be off of gluten. I do feel and believe that gluten is inflammatory for everyone, but not everyone will have symptoms. So I usually recommend removing gluten, but I try to do it in a gentle approach because it's a shock. At least it was to me. I'm Italian, grew up in New York. I ate bread every day, pasta every day. And when I went off of gluten, it was very difficult. For me, it was a trigger for multiple different things, but I had a slew of health problems and concerns, and it definitely was a game changer for me. And for people in my practice that come off of it, I don't think there's one person that didn't notice a difference. Maybe not noticing a difference with removing it, but then with adding it back. Like yesterday, a wonderful patient of mine said that every time she brings a little bit in, the next day she almost feels like she has a hangover, which is very interesting. But I don't believe in absolutes or perfection either. For me, gluten is a non-negotiable. Because of how it makes me feel. And like literally like my entire body, everything hurts. And that's typically what I hear other people say. But I think it's more than just that. Like for Hashimoto's, it's like you said, glyphosate, definitely anything we could do to get chemicals or just chemicals in general. So yeah, if we minimize processed foods or eliminate them as much as possible, then yeah, that's going to, in my opinion, make a huge difference, not only for thyroid or immune things, but for everything, for the way that our mitochondria work, that our sex hormones, lots of things can bind to our estrogen receptors. This is what I tell those with female parts that I work with, that I think it matters. I don't think it's just gluten. I think there's there's a lot more things at play.
Oh, absolutely. Like I don't know that anybody is going to be more unhealthy if they remove wheat and gluten from their diet, right? I just don't think that's the case. But I am a bit cautious with people who are become food fearful
Yeah.
and have a lot of anxiety around, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. And so we have to really be kind of careful with people too. And if somebody, I usually say, hey, I don't think you should, I would cut the grains down, all the grains. It doesn't matter to me, because you don't need as much processed grain-based foods as you need. If we tested and you were reactive to wheat, you probably could keep that out. You probably shouldn't do that very often. If you do, here's the things that you need to consider that are going to happen when you consume it. But that could be any food, right? And so
Yeah.
if they're like, okay, I tested positive for gluten, can I go back and eat it? Well, I'm not your boss. Like, I'm your Sherpa. And so if you want to eat it, you're going to have, and you're reactive to it, you're probably going to have chronic immune inflammatory processes go on. And there's things you can do to kind of help that process, but you're still going to probably have issues. If you get some, should you be in a panic mode and be fearful that everything's going to go back to the way you were when you were less healthy? No, I would say if you got a small exposure to it, take some gluten-based enzymes to break it down, take inventory. What do I feel? What do I function? Your body will typically respond if you're not continuing to pound it into the system. But hey, you learn something like, hey, when I ate that, I didn't feel bad. Okay. But still, you were reactive to it. So don't do it anyway and keep pissing off your immune system because it's likely to come back and bite you. Do it if you had it and you did notice a problem, you go, man, I didn't feel good. It took a couple days to not feel good, but probably shouldn't do that very often, right? But in the beginning, I think it's when we're working with people and they've got lots of things that are contributing to the load, anything that you can do to potentially reduce the load is going to potentially be beneficial. We have this conversation about plant-based foods many times. People are like, but I eat a lot of beans and high lectin and other plant-based foods that can be inflammatory to the gut. And so one of my patients the other day, she's very plant-based and she's like, why are you reducing some of these foods? These are healthy foods. I'm like, yeah, if you had a healthy GI tract, these foods can be healthy because they do trigger when they're in their ripe state, they have some toxicity to them that can stimulate an immune response, but not to typically a problematic level in a healthy person. And that those foods stimulating a little bit of irritation in the GI tract is beneficial. It's like lifting weights. Those foods create a little stress on the gut immune system. The immune system responds, and now it gets stronger and stronger and more resilient. So then when a bigger threat comes in, the immune system is adapted to it. But when you already have a bunch of inflammation and then you're consuming those same foods, could they create even more irritation and inflammation? Sure. Yeah. Especially when they're when they're not ripe, when we're eating force ripened foods out of season, they potentially can create a bigger issue. So, I think long term, we want to be thinking whole food based diet, limited processed food. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, that means a lot of their favorite things that they're eating, which are processed food based, are things that they probably shouldn't be consuming high amounts of if you want to be healthy.
Even if they're gluten-free, right?
Even if they're gluten-free. Some of the gluten-free foods are worse.
Yeah, that's something that actually really hypes me up because they are, most of them are worse. And they're very, very high in starches and blood sugar spiking. I mean, I wore a CGM for a while just to get a perspective on myself, and I was shocked. I thought, well, I don't have any issues. I'm not diabetic. And my blood sugar, especially with rice, it didn't matter, white, brown. Jasmine was actually less blood sugar spiking, but it still did. And it correlated with lots of symptoms that I had, like afternoon fatigue and like brain fog, and even like joint pain, like in the later part of the day. That I don't do a lot of grains. I don't eliminate them completely, but I'm looking for what can I add to my plate, right? And I try to use this approach with the people that I work with, instead of looking at, okay, I can't eat this, I can't have this, you said this isn't good, that what can I have, right? So how many different colors can you add to a plate? Like I show my patients, I take photos of my food. I'm one of those people. And I show them like photos, like this is what I had for lunch today. And they're like, oh my, that looks like it's a work of art. Like you ate that? I'm like, yeah. And it's plants. But it's like fibrous, non-starchy plants for the most part, and variety, lots of fermented things and sauerkraut and things like that. And one of the things I love to recommend, if somebody's really gung-ho on grains, is to swap out like rice for something called like a miracle rice. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's made from konjac. So it's this like prebiotic fiber. It tastes, I think it's delicious, and I've used it. They have like rice, spaghetti, fettuccine, like different versions, and I've swapped them in or mixed them together, like do half grain, half that, and it tastes good. And I feel like it makes a huge difference with my gut and the way that my body feels, where I don't feel like I'm missing out either. So I try to look at like what can we bring in, so we're focusing on a positive mindset, because I know what it feels like to have food fear. I lived in that space for quite some time. And sometimes, if I'm being honest, sometimes I can almost be thrown back there. Like you said, if we're inadvertently glutened or something, I know what it feels like, because my rational mind is like, everything's going to be fine. But then the emotional component, remembering everything I went through and thinking about my parents, what they went through, that it's real. Like food fear can be real. So how can we word things like, instead of like this question, gluten sensitivity, is gluten causing my autoimmune disease, right? That what can we give your body to help your immune system? Like what could be missing? Nutrients that your body craves.
And I think I'll say this, and then we probably need to move on to the next question, or we will only get this one done. But I think I really agree with that, which is we've got to be careful when we need to change something. As the individual, we often look at what we're taking away, but we're not seeing the opportunity. And if we think about changing from our current diet to something different, if you're telling yourself, well, that's going to be hard, there won't be anything to eat, there is nothing I will like, right? You're just making it more difficult. It's only the mindset. You're setting the table for what you won't be able to achieve, because the opposite is true too. And you and I both know this with people who switch to maybe an AIP style diet, and they go, oh my God, there's so many foods I've never eaten before. I've never eaten these things. These are awesome. I would have never switched to these foods before, because I was always eating the same 7 dinners every week, the same 5 lunches every week. I was eating the same thing for breakfast every single day. I didn't realize some of these foods tasted so good, right? So depending on the individual, they can go into it with a mindset like opportunity, or they can go into there's nothing for me to eat, right? And I have that conversation with almost everybody who switches to the diet, and the person is like, there's nothing for me to eat, right? Because you're used to eating massive amounts of carbohydrates and no protein. You have to start getting protein into your diet. But I don't like protein. Well, how do you know? You've been eating carbs for so long, and that's the mainstay. But if your diet was the best for you, we probably wouldn't be talking to you about your chronic illness, right? Your constipation, your loose stools, we wouldn't have that conversation. So we have to help them change the mindset that there's opportunity, there's things they may like that they just never knew before, experienced before, new recipes, new things. Like this is like opening a box of chocolates for some people. Like there's lots of opportunities here. Or you could open that same box of chocolates and go, I don't know which one is a dark chocolate, so I'm not eating any of it. Therefore, this is no value to me, right? Two different ways. Let's go to the next question so we can get through a couple of these at least today.
Okay. Is there a connection between low libido and low thyroid function, and what strategies can I adopt to improve both?
Yeah, I would say you should expect if you've got reduced thyroid function, you're going to have reduced libido. And I think for a lot of people, it's the concept is the same thing we talked about your podcast and I talk about in this podcast. We operate in typically one of two models, right? We're either in low stress manufacturing mode, where we're trying to make cells and tissues and proteins and peptides and proteins and cell membranes and neurotransmitters and hormones so we can feel and function good, right? The other model is that we're perceiving stress or danger. And if you're perceiving stress or danger, then we're down regulating the metabolism and the manufacturing process and ramping up the defense mechanisms, inflammation, upregulating the immune response, increasing T cells to go out and lymphocytes and neutrophils and monocytes to go out and find and kill whatever's out there creating the stress response. And so when we're in that stress state, we're going to have decreased manufacturing. And one of the things that the body uses to shift us from manufacturing to cell defense is a reduction in the amount of T3 inside the cells and tissues. And so we're going to have hypothyroid signs and symptoms. That's not broken, that's adaptive. Hey, like a fever is not the problem when you have a cold or a virus or an illness, it's the body's solution. So when it comes to hormones, just think about this. If I am being chased by a tiger, right? Do I need to lay down and take a long sleep? No. So my sleep will or should be disrupted. I shouldn't have a nice restful sleep if I'm in stress mode. Am I going to use energy to make sex hormones and regulate sex hormones when I'm under threat? Probably not. You're not going to probably do that very good. It's going to be down regulated. So I would expect that anybody who's got some type of a hypothyroid condition has some type of a cell stress physiology going on, and therefore they're going to have dysregulation of their sex hormones. And how that dysregulates is going to be potentially different for each individual and what's going on. But I think those two things often go hand in hand. And the terminology I use with some of my clients and in the book is a multi-system adaptive disorder. When we're under excessive amounts of stress, the physiology needs to turn down the energy going to things that are less important to survival and self-defense. And sometimes that's going to be not just one system, but multiple systems. You should expect that, hey, maybe my cortisol is not going to regulate the same. My sleep's not going to be regulated like I want it to be. My sex hormones aren't going to regulate the way I want them to be. My digestion is not going to work the way I want it to be. Why? Cell stress is about inflammation and defense. Am I going to stop and have a big meal while a tiger's coming after me? Probably not. So do I need energy for those systems? Probably not. But that's where we run into trouble is we're trying to force normal GI physiology when we're under a lot of emotional stress, right? That excessive emotional stress is down regulating our GI tract. And now we're saying, well, I'm going to continue to jam more food into that system and I'll just throw digestive enzymes on top of it. And why isn't it working? You know what? Let's take this colon mover product and that'll move it so we can put more food in the system, load you with a whole bunch of digestive support, and then we'll force the stuff out with a laxative. And we call that optimization. I don't think so, right?
No, that is not optimization at all. And I mean, my nurse practitioner brain, especially coming from women's health, you know, a lot of women have a lot of questions about estrogen and hormones and thyroid and how everything plays with each other if they're playing nice in the sandbox. And I want to give them something, right? That's the training that I had. Like, well, maybe take this or try this, or maybe we should use hormones on top of that. Maybe that'll help. But if we don't look to the reason why the body is adapting, then what's going to happen with all the hormones that we shove in to the body, right? And this is the concept I think about this. I dream about this, frankly. I need to get a life sometimes, I feel. But I think about if I just prescribe T3, let's say, because that's everybody wants T3, right? Because then bypass the body's conversion and just go straight to the active hormone. Then and give a little bit of estrogen, right? Then we're going to be optimal at that point, and we're not going to have the hypothyroid, and our sex life is going to be stellar at that point, right? And I have to like scale it back and say, if I give you these hormones, but your body, it'll be in your blood, right? So I can raise your blood level of hormones, but what are they doing? Are they going to bind to your receptors? Are there other things bound there? And what is the terrain of your body like? Because are you able to break it down and eliminate it from the body then? And you talked about constipation. Somebody has constipation, to me, that's a huge red flag that we start shoving anything in, supplements even. The body has to get rid of them. I don't believe that everything is necessarily benign, even when it comes to supplements. I take a lot of supplements. I recommend a lot of supplements. They're not magic, right? They're to supplement what we should be doing for our health, right? But I think about all of the other factors of the body, because there's a lot of moving parts and we are designed to survive. So if we have a low libido and we have hypothyroidism, just taking medications alone, I don't believe is going to solve that until we really look at, like you mentioned before, I think sleep is crucial, right? And so then maybe for sleep, they're taking, magnesium. They're taking magnesium to go to sleep, or trazodone, which a lot of people take trazodone to go to sleep, but they're using their phones, right? And in the middle of the night, they're playing games on their phones. And that's not like, you can't outrun, like, I hate to say it, but like poor habits, right? And I was the queen of poor habits.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do any of these things.
But if we go back to like what you were asking, like, yeah, I think that's important, because somebody might be listening to what we're saying, especially what I'm saying, and saying, oh, you don't think bioidentical hormones are good. No, that's not what I'm saying. If you have low estrogen, it's going to impact your mitochondrial function. Okay. So if you have abnormally low estrogen, it's going to impact your mitochondrial function, which is going to impact energy function, which can influence to some degree the ability of your thyroid hormone to help you burn fat and do a whole bunch of things. But if we just come into if the standard becomes you have low estrogen, we're going to give you some estrogen, you're going to feel better. I don't really have a problem with that, but then that becomes what we do, and then we move on from there. But what we really should ask is, if you're a 30-year-old female and you have low estrogen, why is this person having low estrogen? Shouldn't we be looking at what's happening at the ovaries, that he's not generating estrogen, right? Shouldn't we be looking at what might be going on there? Shouldn't we be looking at the HPA axis and seeing what's going on there? Shouldn't we be saying maybe there's inflammatory mechanisms that are influencing what's happening at the ovaries? And is more estrogen into a system, in that system, going to be the best long-term for the individual, or are we just potentially managing some symptoms? And if we provide estrogen to that person to make up for what was deficient, right to your point, what happens to said estrogen? Does it just get metabolized out of the system? Does a little bit hit the receptors? Does some of that create problems with receptors and potentially drive cell replication that we don't want. And if we're a 55-year-old female who has signs and symptoms of low estrogen, should the standard be that we just give them the estrogen of a 30-year-old and assume that that's what the body wants and needs? Or should we ask the question, we're built to have low estrogen in our 50s and 60s and 70s. We're not, if this was just, is it everybody dysfunctional in their 50s and 60s and that the body just forgot how to make estrogen? Or is that there's a natural decline for a specific reason in human physiology? And is there, while we can provide a drug that makes you feel a little better, what are the long-term consequences of taking estrogen, excessive estrogen at that age that may have a negative impact? And people say, well, it's good for bone density. Yeah, but we got along for decades, thousands of years without estrogen support in our 50s and 60s and 70s. Is estrogen made? If we take exorbitant amounts of estrogen in our 50s and 60s, could that really help a woman's bone density? Maybe, but that's truly probably not the reason. Now, if they're below what they should even have in that phase of their life, I agree. Some might make them feel better. Some may have benefit. But I think what often happens is people say, well, I'm going to optimize you back to 30 where you feel good. And then we're going to say you're good. And then 10 years from now, when said person has some other chronic health condition because they've been taking bioidentical hormones for an extended period of time that was excessive to where they are in their time in life, nobody's going to go back to that person who prescribed those bioidentical hormones and think, oh, could these things have contributed? They couldn't have contributed to any of my health issues because they're natural, they're bioidentical. Well, yeah, but as a 50-year-old, or 60-year-old, you're not designed to have the estrogen of a 20 and 30-year-old. If they were, that would be great. We see this in men as well, right? Men are their testosterone's going down for various reasons. If it's low and we give you testosterone, could you feel and function and look better? Sure, absolutely. That's why people have been shooting themselves up with steroids for years, right? But is there a potential downside to putting excessive amounts of hormone into a system that couldn't make it on its own to begin with? The answer is yes, because you haven't addressed the reason you weren't making it to begin with. And now you've got the issue is now I not only have to take that medication, I've probably forever shut down my natural production of these things. But the third issue is now, if I still have the same inflammatory mechanisms going on, I'm going to aromatize this stuff. I'm going to have other toxic metabolites potentially produced to this stuff. And now I have to add even more drugs into this system to manage the side effects of the process I didn't deal with, right? Listen, I don't really care. If you want to take testosterone and you feel and function great, that's awesome, right? I don't care. But if you're coming to me saying, hey, I don't feel and function good, but I'm taking my bioidentical hormones to optimize my hormones, and I'm taking copious amounts of T4 and T3 to optimize my T4 and T3, but now I still have all these signs and symptoms. Can you help me get better? I'm going to probably say, I probably can, but all this excessive hormone and stuff, we got to get it out of there. Because how am I going to fix you if part of your optimization strategy is contributing to your dysfunction? Right?
Yeah, I agree. And I like to think of optimizing, not necessarily with giving medications or supplements, but optimizing a person's own pathways, own ability to create hormones, to have better health, for like lack of a better way to describe it. That being said, I prescribe medications all the time. I write prescriptions for estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. I'm not against doing that. And I'm all for a Band-Aid. If somebody's really feeling bad, we can do a little bit of something. That's not where I usually like to start. And for safety purposes, and this is, again, I come from women's health, and this may not be what necessarily most people in that space are doing, but I like to know somebody's metabolism pathways because it matters. And frankly, given my background with oncology, so working with cancer patients and then women's health, And a lot of my patients have had a history of breast cancer. Oftentimes I do genetic testing also, and not testing for BRCA, but the modifiable genetic testing. It's not like a requirement. I'm a genetics nerd, probably. Like, I'm fascinated by it, not so we're enslaved to it, but so that maybe we have a little bit more empowerment for making a healthier choice in our life. That's what it did for me, because again, I didn't want to do any of the things that was recommended to me because I wanted to take the magical supplement. That's why I use the word magical, because that was me. I was like raising my hand in class, like, can I have the magical supplement, because I don't want to do anything. Just give me the drug or the supplement, right? But and I'm all for doing that depending on the situation, but I think we need, there's more to the story than just one lab value or 2 or 3 lab values or 1 or 2 symptoms. There's the body, right? What is the body going to do with it? You shove it in there, it doesn't necessarily do what you're anticipating it do, right? So again, I'm not against it. I prescribe things every day.
I think that you think this, like supplements or bioidentical hormones or whatever the drug is, these are supplements, right? Whether it's a drug or a hormone, they're supplements. They're tools to help us accomplish a short-term goal, right? Versus what most of these things are done, it doesn't matter if it's a drug, a hormone, or a supplement. Somebody gets prescribed it, and then it becomes part of their stable of things they do every day. We've got clinics everywhere that are just dosing out bioidentical hormones and never addressing root cause issues. And people think that's that we call that integrative or functional medicine. It's not functional medicine to just put a bunch of people on bioidentical hormones. And at the end of the day, I don't care. If you feel great doing it, it's awesome, right? That's awesome, right? If you say, listen, I feel awesome, and I smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day and drink 2/5 of Jack Daniels, and I feel awesome. Good for you, right? Who am I to tell you that it's wrong? But if you're coming to me doing those things and saying, I'm smoking 2 packs of cigarettes and drinking 1/5 of booze every day, and I don't feel good, what should I do? I think we should do something different, right?
Yeah.
Right? Well, do you think if I took a bunch of Advil, that would help the headaches I get from all the hangover from the booze? Yeah. But how about we just get rid of the booze? Yeah. I don't know, but I like the headache idea. Well, okay. You can use that as a tool as you reduce the booze, but you got to reduce the booze. You know what I mean? So it has to be a tool. Like, I'm not, if you need the Advil to deal with your hangover as you're getting rid of the thing, fantastic to do that, right? But just to say the strategy is to give you Advil and that's going to help optimize your health while you're drinking 1/5 of booze every night. No, that's not the right strategy, right? All right, let's get another question in here so we can keep going through here.
This one is I remember seeing one that was related. Let's see if I can find it. Could my symptoms be a result of poor detoxification pathways affecting thyroid function, and what can be done to support detox processes?
So could you have compromised detoxification pathways that are compromised, that's resulting in compromised health, compromised physiology, compromised thyroid physiology? Yeah. Which came first? Compromised detoxification, the thyroid issue? I don't know. That's the age-old story, right? Is which thing came first, the chicken or the egg? But the simple answer is yes. What can you do? Well, it all depends on what do you think is creating the toxicity to your system? What do you think is causing the problems with the detoxification pathways? I would say initially what the things you can do is you can take a look at your personal, your home, your work environments, and reduce the level of toxic substances in those environments. And that's step one. Like I drink a bunch of alcohol, I smoke a bunch of stuff, I do I eat a bunch of crappy food. I eat a bunch of highly processed food. Reduce those things. I live I'm drinking water that's loaded with toxins. Filter it, right? I live in my house has mold toxins in it. Yeah, filter the air. Get rid of the mold. Like reduce and in our book, we use what we call the free analogy, right? So essentially what we're trying to do is filter, reduce, eliminate, or exchange, right? How can I do these things to clean up my environment? So that's step one. Step two, if you're not doing some type of physical daily exercise, do it. Because when we exercise, we sweat, right? If you're not sweating when you're exercising, you're either not exercising hard enough or you got more significant health issues going on because you should perspire. But moving your body, exercising, whether it's slow cardio, fast cardio, yoga, Pilates, strength training, you're going to contract your muscles, you're going to contract lymph, you're going to move stuff through the body. So that's number two. That doesn't require any medication, doesn't require any hiring of anybody. Step three is you can do things like hot showers, hot saunas, right? Things that are going to help the body support detoxification pathways. You can do things like, and this ties to what we were talking before, if you ruminate all the toxic foods and you're eating more healthy foods, guess what? Those healthy foods are going to have most of the micronutrients in them that are going to support healthy liver and gallbladder function. So anything you can do to reduce the stressors on your system are the things that are going to improve detoxification. And you should probably consider doing those before you start going into detoxification supplements and powders and coffee enemas and all these things that are more invasive, right? We should be considering, what do I have control of that would be contributing to compromised detoxification pathways, and how can I eliminate or reduce those things? That should always be step one. Step two is activity, physical activity and exercise. And then the other things we talk about is working on quality sleep, because your body does most of its detoxification, a lot of detoxification while we're sleeping at night. And proper breathing is another key thing. So again, we're back to the foundational and fundamental things that you can do without and before you start a whole bunch of crazy, sometimes really crazy detoxification protocols. What are your thoughts?
I agree wholeheartedly. And that's where talking about toxic stuff in our environment, I told you I was the queen of not wanting to do any of the things. And that included having multiple candles on my desk, burning these scents, the everything was flavored, right? And I had these perpetual migraines. I've had migraines for years. They told me I'm just going to always have migraines. I actually was hospitalized for it for 3 days before. And they said,
that's because it's a migraine disorder, right?
Yeah. And they said that they can't help me, right? So I just have migraines, and it's who I am. I don't have migraines anymore. It blew my mind. I don't know why it did. You know, I was already a nurse practitioner in healthcare at the time, and that it blew my mind that taking these just scented candles alone, getting them out of my life and getting a HEPA filter, like you talked about. I have one, I'm excessive. I have one in every room. And it was a game changer where I don't have to take Advil and ibuprofen every day. Like, so I look at, and I talk about this a lot with my patients, where could you be getting exposure, toxic exposures? And candles, I will tell you this, can be a very sensitive subject. And I get it. So what I did, because I loved burning the candles, it's pretty, is I got a bunch of these battery operated candles, and I would light them and do my sleep routine. And I tried to teach the people I was working with that we can make a new habit and tie a routine to like habit stacking. So try to get a sleep routine. Sleep is really important. Get your phone away. What can you do as a practice every day, even if it's only 5 minutes? And if candles are really important to you, could you get a battery operated candle? Could you use aromatherapy? right? Something more natural.
Essential oils, right?
Yeah, it made a huge difference in so many people's lives. So I do see a connection between toxic substances and the thyroid, right? Because the thyroid, well, any part of the body is going to be impacted, right? The thyroid's the hot topic, right? Our mitochondria don't want a bunch of toxic substances.
Right. We assume that those toxic substances are only damaging the thyroid gland. They're coming in, they're damaging the gland, right? I don't think that's the case. I think the toxic substances are coming into the body. They're triggering a systemic cell stress response, right? Which is then resulting in more thyroiditis occurring, I think, as more of a consequence of DAMPs and PAMPs being released. So could these chemicals create stress and toxicity at the thyroid? Sure. Right. But they're also creating it elsewhere, because the person who thinks it's only occurring at the thyroid gland is saying, okay, get rid of that and we'll give thyroid hormone because the body can't make it. But they're thinking that toxicity is only at the gland. And so, hey, we'll just give you the T4 and T3 and that's going to fix the problem. No. We also have the conversion issue downstream, which is going on. And that's probably the bigger factor, because people are in these environments and they'll have a normal TSH, normal T4, but they'll still have the under conversion of T4 to T3, and the gland is still working. So if the gland is still working, and maybe they don't have antibodies, so we can't see the thyroiditis going on, but there's still enough T4 into the system. Why do they have the decreased conversion? And then they stop using the toxic substances, and now they feel better, and their conversion's better, and nothing changed at the gland itself, right? So these are the people who are, maybe their TSH is up a little bit. They're at the 3.5. There's enough T4 in the system. Reverse T3 may or may not be elevated, but the real issue is T3 and free T3 are low. And so then TSH is staying elevated to help compensate for that. We rush in there with T4 and or T3 in that situation because we want to optimize or fix it. And that is actually the worst thing we can do, because now we rush in with that T3 medication to deal with the low T3. That T3 suppresses TSH. Now that I've suppressed TSH, I'm going to have less T4 production, and my thyroid gland can't compensate for the reduced peripheral T4 to T3 conversion. And now my T4 and my T3 get worse on the T3. And then the doctor says, well, I want you to take the T3 medication before your labs because I want to see what the medication's doing, like that's better. Well, no, what we're measuring is what you just took. We're not measuring where you are 6, 8, 10, 12 hours from now, right? So this goes back to what we were talking before, right? So we need to address, from a toxicity standpoint, this is where, could it have an impact? Yes, you should expect it to have it. And, could something simple like the chemicals from candles be the problem? Sure. Are they the only issue? Probably not. But if you got chemicals from your washing, whatever you're washing your clothes in, and you've got chemicals from your dryer sheets, and you got chemicals from your candles, and you got chemicals from your food, and you got chemicals from your water, and you got chemicals from the paint, and you got chemicals from the stuff, could that load be contributing to the problem? Sure. Right. And I don't want people to be like, oh my gosh, I have to live in a bubble. It's about the load, right? So what do? You just start reducing the load. It's funny. My wife probably not super excited for me to tell this, but like she was the candle person like you, right? She had to have smelly. I hate them. Like a Yankee candle shop or something. She'd like the one. I'm like, I cannot go in there. I would get irritated as soon as I walk in there because it's just overwhelming. And so, but it's like she would light it, I would blow it out. She would light it, I'd come by and blow it out, right? Because, there's battles you want to fight. Like you got to decide what hill you're going to die on. And the good thing was over time, I think she's really figured a lot of those things out on her own. Like I'm not, it's one thing your spouse is telling you, like, oh, but when you start hearing the same messages over and over again, you start to go, huh. Because when I would maybe want to make some of those changes, be like, oh, I really like my smelly Tide, right? Or whatever the thing is, or the dryer sheets, and you're like, hey,
Yeah.
it's not very good for you. How about we just get these balls and we'll put some safety pins on them, and then we'll dip some, essential oils on them, and then we'll have the same effect. I've been using dryer sheets for 25, 30 years. I like that. Yeah, but your body doesn't, right? So sometimes we've got to make those changes like incrementally, but ultimately we get back to that question. Yes,
Well,
toxicity can be an issue, and it can impact problems in your detoxification patterns, can affect thyroid, and thyroid can affect your body's ability to detox.
and to throw out a reference, Environmental Working Group, ewg.org, I love spreading that to everybody that I work with. And because for me, aside from the candles, it was eyeliner and mascara. And it's, I'm like, it can be hard to be a woman, right? There's a lot of pressure. It's hard can be hard to be anybody, but I felt a lot of pressure. And when I looked up to see what's the level of toxicity in this makeup, it was like off the charts. And that was hard. That was a hard one for me. But then I found non-toxic. They scored a 0 on their verified section. And I love it. Like it's just as good, if not better, and it's cheaper, right? But it took me really like looking at it. It wasn't just the candles, the makeup, dryer sheets, the Tide. We changed everything over here, and I wasn't as understanding for my husband as you were for your wife. So I just said, this is what we're doing. And I took his Tide away, and he wasn't very happy at first, but now he's totally on board because he feels different. He didn't even know some of the symptoms that he was having, like chronic congestion, like he was always needing to use cough drops, and that's gone. So yeah, I think it's very interesting. Oh, well, another question related to that.
Let's do it.
Is red light therapy, can that be helpful for Hashimoto's?
I think it can. When you think about what red light therapy is supposed to do and help, it really is supposed to help with cellular health. So there's a lot of studies that indicate that red light therapy, depending on, what the intensity and the spectrum that it's in, can do different things. But I think it can be beneficial. I haven't seen anything directly that I would say, and maybe you have, that doing it appropriately is problematic. Now, like everything, like when we're doing any type of therapy, we are potentially putting a little bit of stress into the system to create change, right? So we have to be cautious with any therapy, including red light therapy. Cold plunging today is like a huge thing, right? And people are like, well, I'm going to do it for like 15 minutes. Like, because if a minute and a half is good, 15 minutes is better. And you're like, probably not, right? Because it's a stress on the system. So do I think it can be helpful? Yes. Do I think it's the magic thing that's going to change you from immune driven to not immune driven? No, but I think it could be. I think it could be a tool in the toolbox if it's used appropriately. What have you seen?
I agree. When I got this question, it's actually ironic because I'm very interested in red light therapy. I've been doing a lot of research on it and thinking. I have a couple of patients that asked me about it, and so I kind of immersed myself in it. And I agree that it's a tool, just like a sauna could be. It's not the same thing, but like a sauna can be a tool. But if somebody's in the sauna an hour every day, I don't necessarily think that's going to be the best thing to do either. Just like exercise. Exercise can be a healthy stressor. But what I was doing with exercise, which was running every single day, sometimes twice a day, and never giving myself a chance to recover, at that point, it was an intense stressor on my body that likely was contributing to my worsening hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's disease that I didn't even know I had at the time. So I agree. I feel like it could be a useful tool. I haven't seen anything to show that it could potentially be harmful, but I think we need to, like you said, look at like a plan for how to best utilize it, because it is one tool. I don't think this is the magical thing to do. Everybody with Hashimoto's should go out and get red light therapy, but I think the jury is still out. I'm in the research. I haven't completed my assignment yet, so I'll get back to you.
Yeah, and I think for almost everything, right? And we've already kind of hinted towards this, but lots of things are beneficial in doses, and everything's potentially problematic when it's chronic. So exercise, I think you could exercise every day, but you wouldn't do an exhaustive chest workout every day and expect to get stronger. You have to allow for recovery, right? I love sauna. I have an infrared sauna downstairs, and I'll get in that thing a couple days a week. Would I do it every day? Probably wouldn't do it every day. I don't do it every day. Why? Because I'm in there for 30 minutes, high temperature. That's a stress on my system. But I think it's great to do it in doses periodically, right? Every day, a little bit more stress on the system. If that was the only stressor I was putting on my system, maybe it wouldn't be a big deal. But if I'm also exercising and working and doing that and jumping in a cold plunge and do it, you know what I mean? If I'm doing all of these different things day in, every day, and then never allowing for some break from those things, even though they all might be considered healthy habits, all of those on top of each other, because the goal of each of those is to stress the system a bit, plus everyday life stress and business stress and relationship stress, all those things, it can be excessive. So I think that one of the things we don't do enough of is rest.
Yes.
I'm like top of the list. And I talk about this a lot. And regardless of what somebody thinks about hunting, it's been one of the things that's been very beneficial for me. I took up shooting a bow as a tool to help just kind of turn off from things, right? Because when you're shooting a target bow, you got to work on your breath. You got to clear your mind. You got to focus. You're really trying to hone in on just really focus. So for me, I'm not going to sit in the middle of the floor and hum, and that's not how I would do meditation, but this is good for me. But you can only do that for 15, 20 minutes before your arm and shoulder and everything. You're like, okay, I'm losing control, because it's taxing on the system. So again, like you wouldn't do it for hours on end, because that habit becomes problematic. I'm creating an injury by overtaxing the tissue, right? But then somebody suggested, hey, why don't you start archery hunting? And the first time I went out to sit out in the woods out there by myself, and I'm only like a half an hour into sitting by myself in the woods. I'm like, my brain could not stop. I had so many things going through my mind. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this. And I was like, I got to get out of here. I got stuff to do, right? And started to realize that it was very difficult for me to sit by myself and deal with myself, right? All that conversations that was conscious or subconscious that was going on in my mind. And that's when I realized that I really need to be able to force myself to do this, to be able to sit out in the woods by myself for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours in a day. And if I can't do that, I need to do that. And so it wasn't the hunting piece was great, but what was more important was I started to listen to the noise that was going on. And then instead of doing what so many of us do, which is I'm going to block that noise out with some other thing so I don't deal with it, that noise is still going on. It's still perseverating in our brain. It's still creating stress and anxiety and winding up our amygdala. And when we always say, I can manage stress so well. No, you might or might not. But what are you doing instead of listening to that inner voice? You're on Instagram, you're on TikTok, you're watching TV, you're listening to a podcast, you're doing something else. You're not listening to that little voice that's inside your head. And if you can't put that time in, I don't care how you wind up listen, spending time doing that, whether it's meditation, yoga, breathe, like whatever your tool is, I think for so many people at the root of their chronic health issues isn't the organism, isn't the toxin. It is what's going on between their ears that they're not paying attention to. They got false realities going on in there, like belief, habits, behaviors, all of that stuff. If we're not dealing with it, it is winding up your amygdala. It's winding up that fight or flight system. And you can do all the gut support protocols in the world that you want. If you don't deal with what's going on between the 6 inches of your ears, you may never have a good solution. And you're going to go through multiple Taras, multiple Erics, multiple clinicians, all thinking we all suck because none of our strategies work. But the thing that was the biggest driver of your load is often what's going on between 6 inches of our ears. And it takes, I think it takes some people would just say, I just have anxiety, I just have depression. You have anxiety and depression for a reason. And one of the things is what goes on up here. We call it depression because we're not dealing with what's going on, or we have stinking thinking going on. Sure. Could it be gut issues and imbalances in neurotransmitters? Absolutely. But man, we've got to get control of what's going on between our ears if we're ever going to have a higher level of health.
I love that you said stinking thinking. That's a term my mom used to say. You made me think of her. And I was the queen of stinking thinking, right? And I used to say, I cannot calm down. Like it's impossible. They used to say I had ants in my pants as a kid. I couldn't just sit. I had to be doing 3 other things or 10 other things at the same time. And when I thought that I had cancer and thought, okay, Tara, something needs to change. I need to do something different. And it was a very tough change for me at first. When I started thinking about what am I thinking about, right? And I'm constantly having to stimulate my brain with something to take my mind off of this, right? So something's bothering me. I don't want to deal with maybe something that is on my mind. So I need to jump into all of these other things. And it took me really pushing myself. Like I love to be outside. I love nature. I love to take photos and things like that. But going out and just like being there in the woods and just standing there, as crazy as that sounds, and allowing all of the thoughts to come racing through my mind and then being settled in it. Like I realized, wow, I had no idea I can actually sit still. I told myself I couldn't. And everybody used to say, Tara just can't. But I can. And if I can do it, anybody can do it, right? That I needed to quiet the noise around me. And that's why phones, I'm just as guilty as everybody else, right? It's such a big part of our lives. But I want that break, that peace for me so that I can just listen and just be present, because I believe that's one of the key components to dealing with any disorder, disease, but in particular, things with the immune system, right? It's already on overdrive. So somebody has Hashimoto's, right? Or whatever. It's on overdrive. So what can we do to let the body know that we're good, right?
And sometimes, unless you have those moments of quiet where you've filtered out the other stuff, you don't know what's going on inside. You're not aware of what are the internal conversations. You're not aware of what those thoughts are because they've been blocked out somewhere. They're still separating in the mind. But until you really have a quiet time, you can't really even start to evaluate what those things are, to say, wow, I didn't realize I had that bad thought about my brother, my sister, my sibling, my boss, my spouse, my partner, myself, right? Because there's so much other noise that you never get to it. So I think that piece is being able to quiet the mind is one of the best ways to reduce toxicity, and that's emotional or psychological toxicity when we get down to it, right? That's what's really going on with that piece of it. Tara, unfortunately, we're going to wind this up. So what we're going to do is, and for the listeners, we're going to get through all of the questions Tara has. So what Tara and I are going to do is I'm going to have her set up, and when typically the podcast comes out about every 2 weeks, but what we're going to do is Tara and I are going to try and schedule a couple more sessions kind of back to back to get these out. And then what we'll run and what I'll wind up doing is just we'll have a special weekly outlay so we can get all of these things done in order in a timely fashion. So Tara, appreciate you coming on the podcast. I'm glad we got through some of this stuff, but we'll make a promise to get through all of those questions before we finish up this podcast series. Thanks so much for coming back on. For the listeners, share this episode with your friends, your family, and stay tuned for the rest of the episodes in this series.